Welcome to the Genealogy Happy Hour, a place where new family historians can learn to document their family histories and celebrate their new discoveries. I'm Amy.
And I'm Penny, and we're here to help you discover your family tree from the beginning.
Welcome to episode 61. Well, Penny, it's a new year, 2021. 2020's gone. So we've got a new year. We've got a whole bunch of new podcasts to record. And we're going to be going back a little bit and taking a look at a deeper dive into record sets and taking a closer, more detailed look at some of the records that we use in genealogy every day throughout our research. But first, do we have wine, Penny?
Do we have wine, Amy? Yes, we have wine. So this wine, this is a Jordan 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon. And my son's girlfriend brought us a bottle from her family over the New Year's holiday. And that was really sweet of them to share that. And I will give you the description from the website. This is from the Jordan Wines website. It says, pure elegance in a glass. Aromas of black cherries, pomegranate, dried cranberries, and a hint of graphite channel classic Bordeaux. Its lovely, silky texture coats the palate with layers of black cherries and a touch of cedar from French oak's fine tannins. From beginning to end, the balance carries all the way through. And I will have to say, I think I drank it without letting it breathe a little bit. And I really did taste those tannins. And I wasn't a fan at the very beginning. But after it opened up and a little while later as we were consuming the bottle, it was really good. And I would definitely get that one again.
Or maybe get it for me.
Might get it for you.
Okay.
You might have one in your future.
I haven't been able to taste it yet. I'm just saying. Sounds delish. Sounds delicious.
So, Amy,
yes.
Resolutions.
Oh, resolutions. It's January.
I had a hard time this year, but yeah.
You had a hard time coming up with resolutions?
Yeah, but
there's so many to choose from.
There are.
It's hard. It's hard to narrow it down.
But it's trying to pick something that you think you can actually stick with.
And accomplish, sure. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
Right. And I have had a peek at yours, and I'm really curious to see how you do this year.
Oh, really? You don't think I'm going to accomplish?
I don't know. There's one I have a little question about. Go ahead. Why don't you share?
So this year, my goals for this year, my resolutions for this year are I want to get my digital files in shape. They're a little out of shape, a little out of order. And I want to go through each of my family lines and just make sure that I have everything that I need digitized and digitized correctly. I have some boxes of documents that I have been sitting on a shelf for about 8 years from my aunt. I want to go through those and make sure that I have all of that information digitized as well. So I'm going to do, my goal is to have one branch of my family done every 3 months. So, and a lot of stuff is already digitized. It's not like I'm starting from scratch. I just want to make sure that I have everything is included and labeled correctly and really get those in shape before I do any more research and add to those. My other goal is to write 3 to 5 memoir-inspired pieces having to do with my recollections and of my grandparents and my mother. And a couple of podcasts ago, we had last year, we had a podcast about writing memoirs and writing about your family history. And I just felt really inspired by that. And I've got some family heirlooms that I'm going to use as the centerpiece for some of those pieces. So they're not going to be long, a couple pages, that type of thing. But so those are my 2 goals for the year.
Very good. I like those goals.
So you don't think I'm going to do it?
I want to see if those memoir pieces show up.
Okay.
That's my challenge to you.
Done.
But speaking of that, I do want to
Yes.
throw out there for everybody, if you are looking at doing a challenge for yourself for writing your memoirs, um, there is a blog by Amy Johnson Crow, and she does 52 ancestors in 52 weeks. So that could kind of be overwhelming a little bit, but it doesn't have to be. She just gives you a prompt, which is like a word or an idea or something each week that you can write about, do a picture, do as much or as little as you want to, but just kind of keeps you on track for doing something each week. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can just Google 52 ancestors in 52 weeks and sign up. It's free and could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was going to, several years ago, I had an idea that I was going to write a blog piece on every one of my grandparents going back on their birth date. I think I did three, and that was about it.
How did that go? Yeah. That sounds like what I would do, because I have a blog as well, and I don't think I've written on it since 2016, so I'm the worst at that.
Yeah.
That's why it's not in my resolutions here. I would like to do something like that, like I started last year with my where all the places that I've lived, and got a little bit of history about why we moved there. So
And
I might continue doing something like that. Yeah. But my goals
yes.
are to do some research over in Europe and across the pond. So I've got a Freitag family in Germany that my aunt has been pestering me to research, and I keep telling her she needs to do it. So neither of us have done it, and I feel like maybe this is the year I need to try to do some of the research on the Freitag family.
Okay.
And my other one is Kevin's family is from England and Wales on his mom's side and his dad's side. He has some Welsh ancestry. And I want to do a little bit more research over there. And so that's going to require not just doing research, but learning how to research in these two areas, which are very different from researching here in the United States.
Right.
Yeah, and if I have time and I've accomplished that, because I will, I might throw in some of the Swiss that are on my mom's side of the family.
Oh, just throw them in there too?
Yeah,
just,
I can just
throw them in there too. There should be a piece of cake. Easy.
Yeah, let's do some Swiss research.
Okay.
So that's mine.
All right.
We're going to do it.
We're going to do it.
We'd love to hear from our listeners to see what their resolutions are this year and see what everybody else is working on.
Well, we did pretty well last year.
We did.
So
we did.
Hopefully.
I think it's good to have somebody to be accountable to.
It is. I think we'll accomplish this goal.
Because we don't want to be on our December 2021 going, we
exactly.
failed.
Exactly.
Okay, but to help us with our research, in this episode, we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at some census forms and things that are on there that you might have completely overlooked. And some things may help you and some may not. Some may just be fun, which was one thing I didn't realize was on one of them. And I just thought that was quite fascinating. And I had to look a little closer at it.
All right. Well, let's take a closer look.
Let's do that.
All right, so what we're talking about today are the U.S. Census records. We're not talking about state censuses. That's a whole nother podcast. But what we're going to talk about today and take a look at are the U.S. Census schedules. Now, if you want to get, and I would highly recommend that you do, go to the National Archives website and you can download the blank forms for each year. And that's a great tool to have at your fingertips because sometimes it's really hard to read all those headings at the very top. But if you get a printout, like one from the National Archives, then you can read those headings easily and be able to interpret the data more quickly. The U.S. Census or the census.gov, and Penny, we're going to put these links right up on our website.
Yes.
The U.S. government census website also has more in-depth explanations for each of the census years, and that includes questions that the enumerators were asking and the enumerators' instructions. So you can go there, and if you're having a hard time interpreting, for instance, an abbreviation, you can get more information about that there, as well as on the Family Search Wiki. Each of the census and each of the census schedules has their own wiki. Some of them are better than others. Some of the links work really well and some of them don't, but there's some good information on the Family Search Wiki too. But the U.S. Census, what we traditionally use, most often use in genealogy, is the population schedule, and that is the enumeration of everyone in the United States, living in the United States, at a specific date during the census year. And in addition to that population schedule, there from time to time also additional schedules such as the slave schedule, the merchant seaman schedule, a veteran schedule, and several American Indian schedules. In addition to the population schedules, there are also non-population schedules such as agricultural, industrial and manufacturing, and mortality. So we're going to take a deeper dive into all of those and find out, take a look at some of the more unique pieces of information that we can get out of those, most of the population schedule and these others for our genealogical research. Now, we're pretty excited that next year, in April 2022, the 1950 U.S. Census will be released. 72 years, there's a 72-year rule. After 72 years, then the census becomes public record. So that will be exciting to see what information was on the 1950 census next year.
I remember when the 1940 census came out, it was just like waiting and waiting for that date for the release.
It was exciting.
So fun. Another year to go. Okay, so the U.S. Census population schedule. Okay, when you are researching in the census, please take notes. Use that blank form that Amy talked about and record what you find. Record the year, the roll number, the state, the county, the page number, the enumeration district, the family number, the dwelling numbers if they are given in that particular census. So you will be able to find it more easily if you have to go back and research again. You'll have all that information. Or if you write it all down correctly, you'll never have to go back because you'll have it right there all written out. And you're one tip that we like to share is to always look for other family members that are on the same page in different households or on a few pages afore or behind. I did that looking for Anson Preston, which I've been working on, and he's in the early 1800 to 1840s. I'm trying to mix him up with his brothers, and it's very interesting to find them all in the same town. Two of them are on the same page. One brother is 3 or 4 pages before, and one brother is 3 or 4 pages after, but they're definitely all in the same town. So it's very helpful to look farther for family members. And the other thing we want you to keep in mind is to note the date the census was taken, in comparison to the birth dates recorded. If you're looking at if somebody's age, and you can, not that everybody always gave their correct age in the census, but look at the dates that it was recorded. And also for children, for those under 1, they might be listed as 2 of 12, like 2 months out of 12. So it would be a 2-month-old. Or if you have one that shows up 15/30, then they're like 15 days out of the 30-day month. So note that'll be different. But children born after the official enumeration date are not to be included.
Yes, they should not be included. So those children that you said, if it's a 2-month-old, 2 out of 12, they were born 2 months before the official date that the U.S. Census was supposed to have been taken. So, for instance, since 1910, April 1st has been the official enumeration date, even though it takes the enumerators many months to get to everyone. The events that they're supposed to record on the enumeration pages sheets are what was happening in that household on that April 1st. So children born after that date should not be included, and then that 2 months would be the child was born 2 months prior to that April date. Suppose that's what it should be.
And also people that have passed or died.
So right, so if someone dies after the April 1st date, they're still going to be enumerated because they were living on April 1st in that household. So
Right. So even if that day says, oh, they took this on August something, it's recorded as if it were April.
Correct. Now, we have the mortality schedules from 1850 to 1880, and that is, again, the 12 months, all the deaths that occurred 12 months prior to that enumeration date. So we're talking about in the 1850s to 1880s, the census was enumerated in June. June 1st was the official date. So you're looking at all the deaths that occurred from going back June 1st of, let's say, 1849 through May 31st of 1850. That's what those mortality schedules are going to show you.
And I have to say, I looked through these mortalities. Well, I shouldn't say I looked through the mortalities. I looked through my ancestors hoping that somebody died in one of those years that I could get maybe some additional information on. And no, of course not. It'll be 48 or
Of course, right.
51.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if they died in September of 1850, they're not going to be on there because they were living on the actual enumeration date. So
Yeah.
So you have to look at those dates. Look at the dates on the enumeration sheet itself, and then you've got to do some calculations there. So
yeah. So the first one, 1790, doesn't give us too much information, honestly. It covers the original 13 states plus the districts of Kentucky, Maine, Vermont, and the Southwest Territory, which is what we now call Tennessee. However, there was a total loss of records for Delaware, Georgia, New Jersey, Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. So the categories were pretty basic. It's males under 16, males over 16, females any age, slaves and free colored persons. Again, no age category there. So very basic information in 1790. And then in 1800 census, they added a few more categories for the age for the males and females. But again, slaves or free persons of color still had no age category. And then in 1810, we now are up to 17 states. But again, some of the data has been lost. And the ages are still they're a little better. And then in 1820, this one's interesting. We're up to 23 states. And this time the census included age ranges for free persons of color and slaves. So we've got some more breakdown in that area. And there is a column for males between the ages of 16 and 18. And the very next column after that is for males between 16 and 26. So the males in the 16 to 18 column are listed in both of those columns. So if you're going through tick marks on your family to see if your family members line up in those areas, that is not two separate people. Please remember that that's the same person and they're counted twice. And there's also a tally mark on there for foreigners not naturalized.
And it also asks for about individuals and households if they're engaged in agriculture, commerce, and manufacturing. And if they are, then that's going to give you a clue that you might need to go and really dig through the deeds records for the county or the town where this individual was living and working, because if they were engaged in those types of activities, they were probably filing deeds for ownership of property, ownership of goods, and So you might be able to find some genealogical information in those deed records.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, as far as the foreigners go, 1820 is about the earliest, I believe, that the United States started requiring ships that were coming in to file their passenger list. So we really don't have any good passenger lists prior to that. They're sporadic. So, but at least you'll know. If you're looking for that immigrant ancestor, that's a good place to start.
That's a good point. So in 1830, they've added some additional age brackets and some questions about being blind, deaf, or dumb. And this time the census also is 2 pages. So when you are looking online at the census, make sure you scroll to the second page because you might be missing some information that could help you in your research. I mentioned before I was working on Anson Preston and his family, and I used Donna Cox Baker's early federal census worksheet to plot out the 1790 to 1840 tick marks in that line. And I know I sent out a link to that in our weekly tips that we send out. And if you haven't signed up for those, please do. We just send out, it's short and sweet. We don't do a long thing. We try to send you a tip that could be helpful, or maybe, lead you to a website or something that could be helpful. And we'll try to send out some this month on the census. But I used her worksheet, which is really helpful in logging those tick marks. And her worksheet lets you make comments by the tick mark. So if I think one is Anson or one is his father, Jacob, I can just write the tick mark and put his name in there, which has really helped me enormously.
Right.
So that's 1840.
Well, yeah, the 1840, they also have recorded all of the veterans from the Revolutionary War and their ages on those. Even if they were not the head of the household, they will still put them as living in that household. So that's very helpful to perhaps get some kinships there, and then ages, and find out who is still living. If they're still living in 1840, then they should have applied for a pension as well. So that's something that you should be looking for if you see a Revolutionary War ancestor in that 1840 census.
And they do also ask about literacy in 1840 and vocation and school attendance. And this one is also a 2-pager, so be sure you scroll across to get all the information. You don't miss anything. 1850, we love the 1850 census because this is the first one that records the members of the household by name, age, and birthplace. So 31 states were covered, and it did have a slave schedule, as well as the general population schedule that we're talking about. And this one had the value of property. If they were married within the year, they were a pauper or a convict, could read or write. 1850 also had a mortality schedule, what we talked about already, which included anyone that died that year.
And in 18, now, even though you see all of the people who were in the household, you can't make assumptions that those are the relationships of those individuals in that household. But it will definitely give you a basis to start looking for other information about those individuals. Also in 1850, on the slave schedule, you're going to be searching, of course, by the slave owner. The individual enslaved people are not named. They're only given a description, but you can tell from that schedule, and this is for 1850 and 1860, if they are a fugitive or if they've been emancipated. So those statuses are often noted on those schedules. And this is the first year that we have a separate agricultural schedule as well. So again, you can be looking to see if your ancestor owned acreage, owned livestock, owned crops, what the values of those were. And also, if there's a female listed on there, then maybe that gives you an indication that the husband died and she's now running the farm, or the business in some way, and then you're going to look for deed records having to do with that property and or the selling of goods.
Yeah, 1850 is a great census.
So
And then 1860 covers 33 states and 7 territories. And the questions are pretty much the same as the 1850, but again, like Amy said, adding the ownership of land and buildings and ownership of property. So that's always interesting to look at, to see what kind of property your ancestor may have owned. And
yeah, and if the population schedule shows that they own property, then they're probably going to also be on the agricultural schedule. They could also be found on the slave schedule if they were an owner of property or enslaved peoples. And there's also manufacturing schedules too. So if they owned, a sawmill or they owned a mine or something like that, then you're going to be looking at those other schedules to get more information on your ancestor.
right, and if they did own those, you can always go back to the deeds too.
Exactly right.
I love those deeds.
The court records are great.
Yeah. 1870 has a few new questions were added, such as, were your parents foreign born? That's always helpful to know. And if over 21, were they able to vote, or if their voting rights were denied? And the 1870 mortality schedule asks if the deceased person's parents were foreign born. So that could be helpful there too. So I went through all of my ancestors to see if anyone was denied the right to vote, because I was curious, and they were
Really?
not.
They
I didn't
weren't?
have anybody that showed a tick mark in that column.
Okay.
Because that would have been like, why? What did you do? That would have to lead to a little bit more research on that one.
Absolutely.
Why are we always hoping to find a juicy story in the past, you know? So 1880, we're going to add the line of relationship to head of the household. Woohoo! Street names on the left, which is also great, especially for those of us that like to plot the places that our ancestors lived on a map. And excuse me, it also adds whether the person is married, widowed, single, or divorced, and it expanded the birthplace information.
So now this is the first year that you can start understanding those relationships in the family. They're going to list grandchildren. What is the relationship to the head of the household? So that's wonderful for us to start truly building those families. The other thing about the 1880 census overall was there was also a schedule for the defective, dependent, and delinquents. So if your ancestor was denied the right to vote, they might be on that schedule. And although it's not very politically correct, first of all, it's not available in all states. There's only, I think, maybe a dozen states, the District of Columbia, that that schedule still exists. But individuals that are institutionalized will also be found on the population schedule as well. So this will be a duplicate for those that were enumerated on the regular population schedule. But there is, this is an opportunity to take a look. If you think that your ancestor was orphaned, then homeless children will be on the DDD class schedule, and you might be able to find your orphaned ancestor or orphaned children there.
I want to pop back to what you said before that, when you can find the relationships of the family. This is also a good time if there's a mother-in-law or father-in-law or parents living with a child.
Yes.
You can then figure out, especially the woman, find her name. And if you went back a few decades and you saw her somewhere with a man, you would know that she was not a child. She was probably the wife. Just now that you've got a relationship, you can place that in a previous census.
It's great to find elderly parents living with their children. It's wonderful.
So the 1890 census, if you're lucky enough to have one of these 6,304 names listed, that's all that remains of the 1890 census. And those names are in Alabama, District of Columbia, Georgia, Illinois, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, South Dakota, and Texas. And even though I named quite a few states, there's really not much out there to look at. And I was even looking in the Ohio one, and a lot of those pages are burned.
Yeah,
Like you can't really even read the information that's on them, even though they've
they
been
exist.
saved.
The
But I will say they're very interesting because those census pages are set up differently than any other census we see. It'd be fun just for y'all to go look at one. Alabama's, I know, are pretty good, or at least the section of Alabama I was looking in, because each family is on a page and they have them set up with their name across the top and their information is scored down.
nice,
Yeah,
nice.
it's very different.
The other thing that did well partially survived from the 1890 was the veterans schedule. Only, and I guess the way they filed them was alphabetical by state. So only Kentucky through Wyoming, those states remain. But if you think that you had an ancestor who was living in one of those states in 1890, you'll find their full name or their widows' names. The widows were included with the rank, the company, the regiment, and the enlistment and discharge date, as well as the length of service. So if you're looking for an ancestor who was in the military, that would be a great place to look if they lived in the last half of the alphabet for dates. So,
Yeah, absolutely. The 1900 census asks for the month and year of the birth. So that's very helpful. And how many years they've been married, and how many children did a woman give birth to, and how many are living. And that's huge hint for if somebody has died, you can track that, like who you've missed. There are also 4 citizenship questions, and this year has an Indian population schedule
yep.
as well.
So this is a wonderful schedule, wonderful year for the census. Lots of good stuff there. So, and yeah, 1910 also has the same questions about the woman, how many children you had, and how many were still living. So, and it's so important, especially because we don't have that 1890 census, and so many children. I mean, there's a 20-year period between 1880 and 1900. Most people were born
Yeah,
and grew into adulthood, and they weren't enumerated.
and gone.
Yeah,
Yep.
especially the women. The ones who were married, we don't have them with their maiden name with their family. So we at least we can know how many kids we need to track down.
Yeah, absolutely. In 1910, also, there's a question on whether you're a survivor of the Union or Confederate Army or Navy. And the instructions were stated to the enumerator. They said this question should be asked as to all males over 50 years of age who were born in the United States and all foreign born males who immigrated to this country before 1865. Right, UA, if the survivor of the Union Army, UN, if you survive a survivor of the Union Navy, CA, if a survivor of the Confederate Army, and CN, if a survivor of the Confederate Navy. For all other persons, leave the column blank. However, you might see a number in that instead of a UN or
a bunch of
CA.
numbers, a series of numbers.
A series of
Yeah.
numbers. I don't know what all the series of numbers are because I have some ancestors that have this huge series of numbers. And what does that mean?
It's something that the enumerators did. It's something they did when they were calculating. It's those calculations. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with your ancestor. There's no codes that have to do with your ancestor. It's some sort of calculation that they were doing. So you'll see a lot of that
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Now I went back in because I was interested to see this one individual. He started out the Civil War fighting for the Confederacy, and the last 6 months of the war he switched sides. So I wanted to see how he answered that question, and he happened to be living out in the Northwest at the time, and he didn't answer the question at all. There's nothing
blank.
there. Yeah, they left it blank.
Or he was never asked. Or the
Well, I
enumerator
did.
didn't
No,
ask.
I did. There on the same page down below, there is someone else enumerated on
Oh,
that
that
same
did
sheet
answer.
that did answer. Yes. So,
Okay.
but he did. He did not. So, that was kind of
Gotcha.
interesting. So,
Gotcha. And you might also see here under the marriage like an M2 or M3, and that means that they've been married twice or three times. I don't have any of that for my people, so, but you might come across that. And also the question about if a person did emigrate, and you will have an NA if they've been naturalized, which means you can then look for their naturalization papers. PA, papers submitted. So again, something else that you can search for. And AL for alien. All right, now 1920, they've got some room for the street name on the side. New questions about your mother tongue. And 3 questions on emigration: the year you immigrated, whether you've naturalized, and what year you naturalized. Again, great help if you're looking for naturalization of your ancestors, and whether or not you'll be able to find some paperwork for that.
yeah, not a lot
Okay,
new there.
1930. 1930. I like the 1930 census. I think this is a fun one. Servicemen were not recorded with their families, but they were recorded at their service posts in case you can't find somebody and they might have been enlisted. And this census changes the way they wrote race. You would no longer put somebody down as a mulatto. If the person was of mixed race, they would be, if it was white and African American, it would be listed as Negro. And there are some other questions on the value of your home or rent. Was it a farm? How old are you at the first marriage? Men were asked what specific war they fought in. And this is my favorite. Did they own a radio? Love it. Because
Well, it is interesting because they also ask on the census if the person can read or write. So, if the person could not read or write, but they had a radio, then you know how they're getting most of the information from outside of their community. They're going to get it from that radio. But if they don't have a radio and they can't read and write, they're going to be very limited into to be able to communicate with the outside world as far as information that they're going to only be
right,
hearing it from their neighbors and not directly from anyone else. So it does
right,
give you an understanding of sort of the educational background in the household, and
yeah,
also I think probably owning a radio. I mean that costs money, so there's
absolutely.
yeah.
That is another indication. And I did a quick little peek at my 4 great grandfathers. 2 were living in West Virginia. Millard lived on a farm, did not own a radio, worked as a track foreman at a coal mine. Hall did not live on a farm, did not own a radio, and was a miner at the coal mine. And my 2 in Ohio, Fred lived on a farm, did own a radio, was a farmer and working on his own farm. And Cecil did not live on a farm, did own a radio, and was the proprietor of a pool room.
There you go.
So yeah, it was just, and it really was kind of the way I thought it would be. That the 2 in West Virginia would not have a radio,
Right.
and the 2 in
Yeah.
Ohio would have a radio.
Right. Interesting. I was just watching a documentary. I want to say it was on Jimmy Carter, but I believe he said that his father, they had a radio, but it was a battery operated radio, so they were only allowed to listen to it for very short periods of time because they wanted to conserve the battery on the radio. So
Interesting.
we just
Yeah,
assumed
that would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But
Wow. And this census also records in which conflict or expedition a veteran served, including Civil War veterans.
yes.
And then
Yes.
we're up to the most recent one.
But also in 1930, before we leave 1930, there's also that merchant seaman schedule, which goes along with servicemen being recorded at their service posts. It's also enumerating merchant seamen and who were on vessels, on U.S. flagged merchant vessels. And not only will you get the basic information about them, obviously, the name of the seaman, the state or country where he was born, what his occupation is, and if he was a veteran, but it will also give a next of kin on that report. So that's something that's really important for us
Nice.
for
Some really good
genealogy, to make sure that that's the same person, that you're going to have at least one contact there, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so now on to
Yes,
1940.
1940 now.
Most recent. Let's see.
Well, this is the first.
This,
I'm sorry.
go
Well, this
ahead.
is the first one that we actually know who gave the information to the enumerator. Up until this point, we don't know where the enumerator got the information for all of those other census. They could have asked the neighbors. It did not necessarily mean that our family or your family gave the information about themselves. So in this one, we know.
Right. And this one also has two randomly selected people from each page
Yes.
that will answer additional questions at the
Yeah.
bottom. And some of those questions include if they had a social security number. That would be helpful to see if they're in the Social Security Index. If they had old age insurance or railroad insurance. And then there are some veterans questions, and then three specific to women. Again, the married, your age at first marriage, and number of children ever born. And then there's a section specific to the employment status of those over 14.
There's a lot. Yes, there's a lot of information on. Again, we're just coming out of the depression, and so there's a lot of information about asking about employment. It almost to me like the 1940 census, because it doesn't really focus too much on the past. It doesn't ask about your parents, except for those two specific people. But it doesn't ask about your parents or where they were from. It's more like really just a snapshot of what's going on in your household on that April 1st enumeration date. So which is kind of cool.
But they also ask where did you live?
Yes.
In 1935, on April 31st, 1935. And that, I find, has helped me a great deal. If somebody has recently moved, you find out where they moved from, especially if you can't find them in a previous census. Sometimes that will help out.
Yep.
And I know Amy mentioned we're not going to talk about state census, but many states did take the census on a year ending in 5.
Right.
So,
and that really help you if you are, to get you the, you've got only 5 years in between. Here in Florida, for instance, we have the 1885, which is wonderful because that 1890 census is not available. So at least we have an 1885 census here in Florida, which really helps.
yeah.
And then we have,
But if you're looking in Connecticut, Idaho, Kentucky, Montana, New Hampshire, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Vermont, and West Virginia, they did not take a state census. So I am out of luck.
because those are all your peeps are.
Ohio and West Virginia, of course.
Yeah, it's true.
So sad. So sad, too bad.
Oh. So, well, I hope that this has been helpful conversation on really taking a deeper look into the U.S. Census schedules. I know many of us, they are available, the actual digitized schedules are available on Family Search and on Ancestry. And Find My Past too, I believe. But and I just found one today where I went to click on it, I found the family, and I looked at the transcript, it's all good, and I went to click on the image, and it came up with a completely different page than where I was supposed to be.
So, I've had that happen too. And
yep.
Yeah.
And if that happens, go to the other website, and you should be able to find it there. So
yeah.
But
Yeah.
that just happens.
That can be so frustrating.
You're like, wait a minute, what? And what you can do is you can go down, if that happens to you, on the transcribed portion, go down to the bottom, and it will tell you what page you should be looking at, what sheet you should be looking at on the enumeration, and then you can just go and find that one on another. If you can't page through it. This one was all messed up, so the way it had been filmed had just been all messed up. So, but I did report it.
Yeah, and so we hope you guys learned something new, took something out of it. The radio one was new for me. I guess I just totally overlooked that line and looking at the census, and I just thought that was kind of fun. But you might have heard a new line that you didn't know before, and that will help you in your research, and we hope it does.
So until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Please email us with any questions or comments at genealogyhappyhour@gmail.com.
Visit our website, www.genealogyhappyhour.com, for additional resources, books, and wines. Don't forget to drink responsibly
and never drink around genealogical documents.